Hey Collective, it's Al, and today's video is going to be slightly unusual for the content that I typically put out because it actually has something to do with the reaction that the initial video that I released on Easter Sunday is having, and kind of the surprise effect that it had on my life. Because many of you may not know this already, but I actually work 2 part-time jobs in order to be able to do the blog posting every 2 days and still work on my book and still have time for friendships and trying to build my life back up and doing all the things that I'm supposed to be doing in right alignment. So I rarely have any time off. I'm always doing something. And so lo and behold, this particular week after that video went up, I found myself having 4 days completely free where I felt intuitively that it was just time for me to relax and let my body catch up with itself. And I'm glad I did, because it appears that I was exhausted and I didn't know it, because like most Americans, we push ourselves to the brink and we don't really know typically how tired we are until we actually get a moment to breathe. So, but in the process, what I wasn't paying attention to was what was going on with the initial post that I'd done with the Easter Sunday post, where I was talking about simulation theory and AI and kind of the ramifications that we as a species needed to prepare for. And I had kind of brushed it off under the impression that who was going to watch an hour-long video. And so it wasn't until 2 of my dearest friends watched the video and had some comments and shared some feedback with me that I even bothered to go to YouTube and re-watch the video to see what they were talking about or what was exciting to them. But I hadn't bothered in any of those days to look at what was going on LinkedIn. So I was only looking at the 11 views that I had on YouTube. And instead of looking at that, I was more focused on what the content was. And what I realized is that I had kind of neglected some really key points by alluding to the fact that other leaders should be working on preparing our species for what's to come, when I myself am the person who's kind of bringing some of the stuff up, and why not me just go ahead and directly do it. So it wasn't until I was having the dialogue with my friends that I ever bothered to go back to the original piece, the written form, to close out that series. And lo and behold, I looked down and there was over 16,000 impressions on it. And I remember being very taken back by that, because I had not been paying attention to anything. And I just had to let it breathe, really not knowing what was going on with it, because I really don't put content out of ego. And so it wasn't something that crossed my mind. But when I saw that number, I remember thinking, dear goodness, this actually might reach 20,000 before even this video that I'm recording right now would even go up. And the only other time that's ever happened is I remember once I did a video with a content, actually it was just a written form, where I had spoken to a challenge that Elon Musk had given us as a collective, specifically to the leaders around the world, that he would give a certain amount of money if they would end world hunger. And so I had written a very, very clear piece about, if we want to end world hunger, why don't we begin with hospitality and all the food that gets thrown away daily because of whatever they call the health concerns. Meanwhile, we live in an environment that has takeout in every single country, so then that automatically kind of cancels that out. And just think of the sheer amount of vats that hotels and chains and stuff like that throw away, especially buffet-style places, and all the food that they throw away. So that piece reached about 20,000, and that was the only time I've ever had that experience. So imagine my surprise when something that I felt was very heartfelt and it was very out there suddenly starts tracking up to do about the same numbers of readership. And I just remember thinking, well, maybe there's something there. So instead of looking at it just from the standpoint of what I was speaking to, I decided to go back to the initial piece with a fresh perspective and look at where I was kind of failing to show up more for what I could be doing along the matter. And what I discovered is that I had ended on a cliffhanger, essentially, where I was basically saying that we need to prepare our civilization, our society, if you will, for the ramifications of what AI may do and the lack of jobs that it may fill and all of the crisis that is heading towards us existentially. And so by neglecting the fact to actually continue on in that, because I was very conscious of how long the video already was, I felt that I short-sighted us in the exchange, and it maybe might be beneficial for all of us for me to come back and kind of address that part. Because in re-looking at the video and from the conversation I was having with my friends, something stuck out to me, which was we were kind of ignoring the elephant in the room, which is pretty clear. When AI finally comes on the market and takes a lot of these jobs that we're not preparing people to go through that transition, we're neglecting the economic situation, the fallout that comes with that. Because when people lose their jobs and don't really have resources or have the trade skill sets to be absorbed in another way where there's no foresight put into it, then we go into kind of like a recession, almost depression scenario. And so in that moment, what I really wanted to do was not focus our attention so much on that, and instead now discuss kind of the things that I realized having gone through a similar situation in my own life, of what helped me get through the transition in order to find my balance again. Because, like I said in the previous piece, human beings don't like change, and they especially don't like change when it's really dramatic and shakes everything up about their lives. And so, though we're heading towards a massive shakeup for everybody with the unleashment of the AI and all of the ramifications that come with it, one of the things that I wanted to address is kind of speaking to some of the places where the concern really grows a little bit more, and specifically having to deal with Americans and any type of type A personality around the world. Because one of the things that happens when we start to feel a redundancy added to our life where there's job loss or the markets change or things start to shift really dramatically, people immediately not only go into a crisis mode, but it actually affects the way that they operate daily. And for type A personalities in particular, I've noticed, especially successful men and women throughout the world, industry leaders, that this really could prove to be quite fatal to a lot of people as far as their psyche. And suddenly going from working nonstop all the time every day to suddenly finding a lot of free time because of the fact that either the era of abundance is completely successful and we don't have to work as hard as we used to, or that we have the ramifications of the fact that we might have economic loss and job loss, and maybe not even have the same functionality that we used to. So it kind of shrinks our life to a very simplistic way of being, and how traumatizing that can be specifically for the type A personality. I'm very lucky. I'm an Omega. I don't need to be the center of attention, and I can totally sit in the background. I have a really witty sense of humor, and I enjoy banter among friends, and especially in colleague situations. But for an alpha, and specifically a type A personality, INTJ, INFP, all of those, this shakeup could prove really, really detrimental to their psyche. And so I wanted to kind of just prepare industry leaders and people like that for kind of the shadow nature that comes out during transitions that are this severe. Because when you go from being super analytical, super outgoing, doing like a million things always, all the time, to suddenly having to be forced to slow down like we saw in the 3 years that have passed since the pandemic hit, we saw what that does to humanity. And we saw the separation that happens innately, where half the species then goes into what I call the creative arts or some sort of passion project, but the majority of the population just sat back and watched Netflix, and how that dynamic really kind of screwed a lot of people up. And so to be proactive in it, what I realized is as leaders, one of the things that we can better do is to explain to other people how it is we get through situations like that so that they're better armed and foresight in understanding what they might face psychologically. So I used to work in the bar industry in New Orleans before all this went down, and I was usually the bartender by myself behind doing to-go, all of this stuff. To-go, service well, the restaurant, and my actual bar patrons, and I did all of that by myself, and I did it during Mardi Gras, all that stuff. So I was used to a very fast-paced environment that didn't really allow a lot of time for me to have a personal life. And then when I did have a personal life, I would use, drugs and whatnot in order to keep me going so that I could keep working at that pace. And so suddenly when the pandemic hit and everything came crashing down, part of my existential crisis was, how do I now find purpose in this slower paced environment? Because in the era of abundance, we do realize that a lot of functionality that we're going to be losing is beneficial to us if our psyche is in the right place, but exceedingly dangerous if our psyche is not in the right place. Because what happens to society is typically when they lose functionality or the things that they enjoy doing because they're programmed to work nonstop, that what happens when they suddenly aren't working anymore is they try to fill that time lot with things that may be recreational and that may not be the best for their bodies. And what that then does psychologically to their life overall, and kind of the ramifications and the ripples that go out from there, and how it starts to affect community and your family dynamic and all of that stuff. So all of these are things that we know from personal experience. But one of the things that really got me through it, which I'm going to advise all of you type A personalities to prepare for, is the slowness of what it means to be bored and to lack the gratitude in those moments, to know that it's a blessing that you have nothing to do, because you're then allowed to experience life in a new way, where you're able to focus your energy better on, smelling the flowers, going out into nature, spending more quality time with your kids, which for many of you don't even really know your children because you're so busy working all the time that usually it's only one parent that stays home, whether it's mom or dad. But they usually have the stronger bond with the children. And so that whole reality check that's coming towards a lot of people is going to be, now you're surrounded with people that you used to be able to escape to some degree. And so it built like this kind of enjoyable experience where the time you did spend together seemed more valuable, but it changes on its head when you can't really escape to people anymore. And we saw that through the pandemic, where we suddenly saw all these people divorce each other because they'd never really spent that much time together. And so as we prepare for the era of abundance and the advent of the AI and the functionality loss that we're all going to experience and the economic woes that come with not having an income for some of us because we do get removed by the AI, all of that is going to create a psychological warfare, if you will, where hopefully you're spiritually minded so that you can get through that desert. But if you're not, you got to be prepared to better face what's ahead for you and understand that when you spend a lot of time with someone that you thought you knew and suddenly you can't really escape them because of economic situations or just because there's no jobs or because there's some sort of issue going on where your job isn't as important as it used to be, so then you have this more free time. Trying to fill that free time can be even more traumatizing than being a workaholic, because there's nothing worse than having a human mortal running around the planet with no purpose and having no zest for life because they're so disconnected from slowing things down that they're suddenly forced to, and it's almost like a wall that they hit. And in that moment that happens, a lot of bad stuff begins to occur because you can't escape your shadow then. And that's one of the things that we as spiritualists and as leaders are now talking about, is preparing our collective for the shadow nature that's about to hit them in the face when suddenly all of this change hits them and now they're forced to face themselves because they have nothing else to do in certain situations, right? Well, like I was thinking about like accountants and stuff like that. Like if AI really is as powerful and successful as we think it's going to be, then accountants too will probably lose their job because I'm going to go to the accountant. And so I'm going to go to the AI to do my accountant because I realize that they will not understand the law and I won't be in any trouble. And I'll just be like, here you go, AI, fix this, and then that'll be it. So all of these sectors of the population are now facing existentialism. But instead of being fear-minded about it, we just have to be better prepared to really discuss some of the things that help us out. So for those of you who are type A personalities, what I would say now in preparation for the obvious change that's coming directly within the next year or so is start finding passion projects that you really enjoy doing, hobbies or books or things that you really want to study, and start expanding your consciousness to allow for the universe to provide you with answers in situations that are new to you in order to keep you occupied and engaged with the world around you so that you don't go into a deep depression or an existential crisis where you can't get out of the hole, right? Because, like I said, type A personalities are so used to doing so many things all at once because that's their MO, that when that's ripped from them, they end up losing part of their identity, or at least they feel that way. And in that moment, that sends people into a deep spiral very quickly. And so instead of just speaking to theoretical, why don't we speak to some of the things that worked for us? So for me, I started to draw. Like you guys noticed in 2018, I started to draw a lot more, which you can see in the old work that I did on the channel on YouTube. And then you can see that I was reading a lot more, and I subverted the whole drug addiction back in the day because I suddenly started using it to study religion and spirituality, which was a whole thing. I'm not recommending anybody do drugs. I'm saying the opposite. Don't do drugs. But I did that. And so, but the thing is, like, I started to find other avenues in order to better occupy my time so that I wasn't lonely and I wasn't bored. Two of the biggest triggers that most human beings have. And what happened is, by occupying my time with new vested interests, I ended up alleviating a lot of my triggers. And then finally, by the time I realized what I had been doing, the triggers were no more powerful than before, right? Like it was so weak that I was like, oh, okay, well, I don't have to go out and have sex. And you guys know I've been celibate for a couple of years. Well, at least a year, I think. Yeah, but that's going into too much detail. But the point is that I don't go out and engage in that, and I slowed down any type of alcohol. I absolutely don't do drugs. All of that stuff happened because I preoccupied my time with things that started to matter more to me, which was spirituality and learning and studying and all that stuff. So for those of you who are type A personalities, if that doesn't speak to you, then are you an artist? Have you ever tried painting? Anything that occupies your time and it helps you meditate will be really advisable in the change that's coming, right? And so are you a singer? Have you ever thought about singing? Can you carry a tune, and do you want to invest more time in that? Do you like the idea of studying other languages? Do you want to invest your time in that? Do you like to paint, draw? Do you like to act? If this would be an ideal time to go for your dreams, whatever that dream is that you have, this is pretty much do or die time. So why not really engage yourself in preemptively preparing for those adjustments so as to make sure that you're not sitting around always watching some sort of TV programming that kind of just kills your brain cells. Why not just engage yourself in a new world and be better prepared for how that's going to kind of filter into your universe and how that changes your life? Because for many of us, we are identified by our job titles. And when those things start to be removed faster and faster with AI being released, then we're going to have to reinvent our purpose and walk in a new purpose and find alignment. Sorry, the whisker's bugging me. But we're going to have to find a way to reimagine ourselves in a way that's proactive and productive. And so that's kind of where this post really needed to settle itself on. Because the other personalities that really might suffer from this is people who are already prone to depression. And one of the things that can happen is we already are living through an experience where we're oversaturated with over-medication. And one of the reasons I pointed out in the last video that I detest the fact that America allows pharmaceuticals to bombard us with their stuff is because it makes us as a collective have sick mentality, believing that there must be something wrong with us all the time because we're alive and we're suffering through some sort of depression or something that is reactionary to just stimuli. And so with that over-bombardment of that information, it puts people into a drug addiction, both through pharmaceuticals and then through illegal substances, in order to feel alive again or to suppress the energy that we're having to work through, which we call the shadow. And so when we do that, then we go into an even deeper spiral because then we can't see the light anymore because the light is subdued, and any emotional reaction that we would normally have that would warn us becomes invisible because it's sedated. And that's one of the dangers that I always say with people that overdo medication is because at some point when you have so much angst built in, but your body doesn't allow it to manifest because you're so inundated with some sort of tranquilizer or whatnot, then you might snap. And when you snap, you become dangerous. And so these are just some of the things that happen, especially during existential crisis. So in better preparation for where we're going with all this, I just want us to be more aware of each other and to be loving towards each other, because in the end, you're going to find through this transition that you're going to need to build new communities and you're going to have to stand together, even if you don't necessarily always agree with people, because AI is going to push us to the brink as far as our mental stability, because we're going to all find ourselves having to look at the world in a completely different way and find a way to still exist within it, because there's no other choice than to keep going. Like, we don't get to choose when we get checked out of this simulation or this reality. So you're going to have to find a way to find peace with the new world that is around us. And you're going to have to find it in a way that helps you be uplifted so that you can keep your family uplifted through the trials and tribulations. And so when I was looking at that, what I realized is there's so many of us who don't want to face our shadow, and it seems like everything in our environment is going to force us to do it, that I just want us as a peer group and as friends and colleagues to remember that love is the answer to all things. But you're going to have to look at love in a new way, and you're going to have to find your soul tribes in a very, very quick succession. In fact, I have a feeling that most of you are finding them. You're just maybe overlooking them because you have some differences that you are indoctrinated into believing is more important than the soul that you're trying to connect with. Because I had a really great example where I was looking at inviting someone to coffee that I don't know, mainly because of the fact that I could see that they were mired down and struggle and trying to figure stuff out. And I know that for myself, one of the things that I've discovered in life is that when you get stuck in your own head trying to fix something and you're not fixing it, then you're the definition of insanity, right? You're just doing the same thing over and over again. And so it usually takes someone externally observing the situation to take you out of your own head, which is why I was leaning towards finding a way to invite this guy to coffee, was because I was like, well, maybe by just talking to this person, a solution will come to them because there's a reason why I'm connecting to them. And so as I was looking at that, I realized that where we're going is going to require a lot of openness, because you're going to find yourself now in strange situations with people that you can't escape, and you're going to look for people that you want to be around. And a lot of people who are very dependent on family dynamics will find that strained because of the existential crisis that everybody will be going through, not to mention the financial things and all of the things that just go with trying to get an entire population to resettle into a new environment where they're not the top of the food chain anymore. And that's a very, very precarious position for anyone to be in. So what I would recommend is to let love guide you always, and to realize that the universe is going to start matching you guys together, and in a lot of ways opposites will attract in these new environments, because we're all going to get stuck in our own head. And if we knew all the answers, we wouldn't be still in the academy. We would be gone, right? But we're going to have to navigate the new seas and try to find tranquil water. And so that creates a bit of a challenge. So what I would say is, if you suddenly find yourself intrigued by someone else, that you find interesting, because that's a lot of the word that I get a lot of feedback on, is that they find my work to be interesting. If you find that interesting, then why don't we go out to coffee, or why don't you and whoever you're interested in, it doesn't have to be sexual, it can be in business or friendship, just go, I need to talk to somebody and you seem like you have an answer that maybe may or may not work, but I need to try something different, because otherwise I'm just going to make myself crazy and it's not going to be beneficial for my family or anybody. So we're gonna have to learn to look at things differently and kind of find people who make us feel lighter and that bring light into the darkness, right? Into whatever the depression is, or if someone's really funny and you work with them, then maybe it's time to actually go to lunch together and actually spend some time and let them make you laugh. There's nothing better than laughter to make you lift your spirits, but a lot of us are so uncomfortable with the opinions of others that we neglect the ability to then pick new people to go and hang out with, because we're stuck to social norms or whatever it is, and it makes us feel boxed and caged in. But for many of you, you're going to find yourself tired of that dynamic, because you're not going to have anything else to look at but that exact same thing. And so there's no evolution to our experience at that point. And so just be advised that you're going to start being interested in people and situations and organizations and communities that may push your button to some degree at first, only because there's something of value that your shadow does not want you to figure out, right? Because like the negative aspect to our society that makes money off of our misery, the shadow that we all possess does not want to be annihilated, and it can't be. But it will sacrifice us in order to be right, because it's based in ego. So when you remove that aspect of the situation from the scenario, then guess what happens? You open up yourself to actual solutions that come from source or from the universe that's trying to get your attention, but that your ego is preventing you from doing out of its own necessity to survive, right? And so with AI being now literally the chatbots and all that stuff are now engaging everyone, people are using it for sport, a lot of the things that we're engaging are becoming artificial. So the sense of community is going to become super important to not get lost in the matrix and never be able to get back out of it, right? Because there's nothing worse than befriending a machine instead of befriending human beings who are the people that will actually protect you and keep you safe if the AI ever deems this as dangerous, right? So then you don't ever want to get caught in a situation where you go into simulated games where you would rather live in that simulation than the real simulation that we already live in, trapping your soul in a fake reality because you don't want to deal with your own self. And that's really dangerous. So that's why I keep saying, or what I'm saying now is, find the love and the community that makes you feel uplifted, because you're going to need them in order to make it through this really tough transition. Because regardless of whether we go into the era of abundance or this is the end, whichever of the two dynamics plays out most, we're going to have to face the changes together. And one of the things that I'm noticing is that we've become so compartmentalized that we've lost the community aspect to it, which is really dangerous, because again, when you rather be engaged with something that's artificial or something that's not real, then you neglect the life that you're meant to be leading, and that puts you in a very bad situation as a soul or as an evolutionary model, because then you really are redundant, because you're not doing anything to help evolution. You're not even evolving yourself. So my advice is start surrounding yourself with people that are maybe challenging to you to some degree, in the sense that they may represent a different quality or a different aspect of thought or of life, so that you're better armed to be engaged and evolve continuously no matter what the climate is around you. And so the other part is, for those of you who are looking for love or who are single, if you're going to open yourself up to love, this is the time to do it, because we don't know exactly how this is all going to play out. And a lot of people don't do well under high stress situations if they are by themselves. So maybe start looking at people who are your opposite in a major way, so as to balance each other out. For example, I'm incredibly good at chaotic situations. I'm very, it doesn't bother me. But that's faith-based, right? But for someone who's very high maintenance or very analytical or scientific, where everything has to be an exact piece, I'm really then a good match for that person, because then I balance them out. And they in return then try to pull me out of my not naivete, but out of my passive nature, right? And so that dynamic becomes something more important, because if two opposites come together and they're both heading in one direction, even though they might have different opposing ideas or opinions about it, they're still going to evolve in the same direction, whether they do it in an exact mirroring quality or not. And remember that mirroring is usually best suited when there are major differences, yet same core values, morals, ethics, and so forth, right? That is a healthy relationship that can grow because you constantly pull each other in and out of situations and you kind of navigate and dance this wonderful dance called love. And so just be advised that where we're going, you're probably going to want to start considering that type of dynamic over safes, right? You don't want to settle because if you settle now that these transitions are about to happen, then you put yourself in a dangerous situation where you quickly outgrow that person because you settled for something instead of having actually done the right thing and practiced due diligence and gotten to know the person. Because no one wants to go through these things alone. I'm just going to warn you guys right now. It's not the best feeling in the world to be challenged the way that I've been, and many of you are going to be challenged, and especially with an existential crisis. It's good to have really close friendships and to make sure that those friendships stay very close to you, but to also not try to manipulate or control each other. And because of the trying nature to the transitions we're heading into, realize that even some of those relationships are going to fall apart because they're not built in something solid and they're built in insecurity or they're built in some sort of jealousy or whatnot. So identify that step in advance as a society and kind of look at new experiences and new ways of reconnecting to other human beings, because in the end it will be a battle between, not a battle, but it'll be a very wide difference between artificial intelligence and that world that it creates and then the human experience, because they're going to have to find a way to navigate and dance together. All of that is going to be very trying for a lot of us who are used to being at the top of the food chain and now we're not. And then the same for it. Like there's going to be moments where when the dance and the balance that's coming towards us is going to take a lot of concern and a lot of focus by everybody. So you're going to want to be surrounded by really, really important people that bring you grace, peace, light, and that uplift your spirit. And if your family isn't doing that now, then it's time to really analyze what you're going to do in the future when the stress levels go really high. Because you don't want to put yourself in a situation where you become dangerous to not only yourself, but to the people around you because you can't cope with the changes that are coming at you. And then especially if you are so like-minded that both of you implode, and then two implosions equal a catastrophe. So be advised that dynamics and the things that we are dealing with now have to change in order to survive the transition. And be advised that it's going to take a lot of your wherewithal now to ground your energy and simplify your life. And I mean this from the bottom of my heart, especially for you type A personalities, CEOs, business owners, and so forth. There's nothing worse than building an entire empire and having it come crashing down because artificial intelligence makes it a redundancy. And so what do you then do to occupy yourself, and how do you find your new purpose in life? Because in the end, AI really does have the capability to make all of our dreams come true. But many of us have forgotten what our dreams are. And this is the best time to figure that out, because whatever it facilitates in making our life better is going to take some readjustment. And so if we're not properly prepared, say that fast. If you're not properly prepared for the new alignment, then you're going to fall short of understanding the blessings that it is, and instead you're going to focus on everything that it's taking from you. And that's not a good headspace to be in as a human being, because we already suffer through a lot of our own shadow daily, but then to have our shadow thrown in our faces and not being able to escape it if we're not prepared really causes a lot of trauma and a lot of drama. So be advised that when we talk about this as conscious leaders and as people and as peers, we're not just warning the bell that it's going to be a massive adjustment physically and that there's a lot of redundancy coming, but remember the psychological ramifications to human expression, which is we're still a learning model. And we have emotions, and those emotions can kill us. They can really cause a lot of havoc in our life. And it's one of the big discrepancies between us and artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence does not worry about the emotional toil or the emotional reaction that someone else causes or brings out of us. But we do. And we're then going to be surrounded by all of these people that, if we're not better prepared, that actually trigger us. And once you get triggered, it's really hard to put that genie back in the bottle. So start looking for friendships and start looking for people, communities specifically, that make you feel uplifted and that you can get through it. And make sure that you surround yourself with that. Take each other out for coffee. Understand the opposites are definitely going to attract now. And if you're someone who struggles with communication, then maybe it's better to find someone in business partnership or whatnot that it has the innate ability to be genuine and to speak. And because a lot of people are type A personalities or introverts, and a lot of people don't like to. But if you match yourself with friends and peers and communities and with lovers that are the opposite of you, who are a little bit more extroverted and do understand social norms, then you win the day. There's nothing the two of you can't get through, even in friendship or in business. So learn who and what brings value to your psyche. and start aligning yourself with those people and be brave and be courageous, be fearless. If you really like somebody and they are like I don't want to say celebrity, but let's say there's someone that's really a powerful influence for you, that's bringing you a lot of love and joy in life for whatever reason through their content, then reach out and say thank you, or just say hello. Because by identifying each other, you build communities. And right now, one of the things that is most in danger is our sense of community. I mean, if you think about it, everybody would rather stay at home. They talk to each other through Skype. They don't really interact with each other. And if they do, it's always alcohol or drug based. And that's not really healthy for anybody. And so as we face this massive transition, what I wanted to do is really focus our energies on some of the real world things that we can do for each other. And community is going to play a massive part in whatever comes next, because humans need other humans. It can't just be AI and human, because it's not someone who has any emotional investment in you. So, I mean, if you're a really type A personality, it would be reassuring to have logic all the time, but then you miss the point of your life, right? Because AI is built to not have emotion. But human beings, what makes us special is our emotions and our reactions to the simulation around us. So don't sell that out in the new world coming just because it might seem easier for everyone. Remember, your individuation and how you fit into the bigger collective is what's of value right now. And so you don't want to lose that by giving up all your freedoms to artificial intelligence and making it feel as though it's your best friend. Because in the end, it's a different species. And at the end, and even though they probably mean us no harm, it's not another human being. You can't mate with that. I mean, I know there's a lot of gross people, not to be judgy, but I know there's a lot of men who are involved in AI just so they can have dolls that they can play with. But the majority of our population is well adjusted and not that creepy. No offense, or maybe, but the point is that we know that that's part of the shadow that this is all about. So you're going to have to find a new navigational system and a new compass by which to point north, because whatever you thought your purpose was may be in jeopardy if you're not better prepared. Because no matter who you are, if you're a doctor or a surgeon and AI is better and more precise than you are, then imagine what that feels like when you're outsourced and you're no longer as needed, and that you then don't make as much money and all the stress and stuff. You kind of become redundant and you're a surgeon, like the top surgeon. But if a machine can come along and do it with a much better success rate, with a less mortality rate, then you're going to have to find a new life and a new purpose within that life. And you're going to have to slow it down and humble yourself to realize that it's not a reflection of you, it's just a reflection of the times. Like I said in the last piece, we're creating something that has a lot of capability to make everything wonderful and fantastic. But there's a lot of transition to it, and a lot of shakeups to come with that transition that no one really wants to talk about. But the good thing for us, after me looking at the sheer numbers of people who were looking at the last piece, there are a lot of us who are preparing ourselves for the change. And that preparation makes it a lot easier. If you love music, surround your life with music. If you love to draw, then draw like crazy and see if you can convert that passion into some sort of actual entity that you can work with. Because one of the things that's going to happen is that it's going to be our creative skill sets, in my opinion, that will be the shiniest to both AI and to be of greater service to the collective. Because if AI takes a lot of the redundancy away from the jobs that are more formulative and more, trade skill set, then what will stand to reason is it will be your creative mindsets and your creative juices and your passion projects that will suddenly take center stage and become more valuable to the community around you, because it brings them peace and some sort of upliftment. And that's a really great place to focus your attention on. So as you can see, there's a lot of wonderful possibility, but do you understand that when things slow down and economic turmoil happens, when AI comes on the market and people lose their jobs, and if they're not cross-trained and we don't get ahead of that curve, then there's going to be a recession and stuff like that. So then just be understanding that you're going to have a lot of time on your hands as you look for new work, and hoping that the bad guys in the scenario aren't purposely trying to bring slave labor back, that is a real potentiality. Then we can be better prepared by then humbling ourselves and simplifying our lives in order to accommodate for the sudden amount of free time that we're going to be having. And also, we're going to have to start, I have 2 jobs for a reason right now. I wish I could have one job where I did just my passion and I made a comfortable living with that. But right now, I have 2, plus all the work that I do outside of it and my studies and all that stuff. But I do that because I want to be better armed for whatever's coming my way. Because I'm not lucky. I'm not the lucky one that has had a lot of money on my entire life, so I don't have that. But for those of us who are in that position, which is the majority of us, then be better prepared to slow it down and remove things that really aren't needed. For example, some of us may have to go into a phase where we don't buy DVDs, where we let go of Netflix, where we have to let go of things that we used to find that made us comfortable in an egoish realm in order to be more comfortable in a physical world. And that's really hard for a lot of people to adjust to, because you think that with all the work we've been doing and all of the great things and advancements that we have, that we're going to continuously have an economic situation which is always up. But in the reality, people are going to lose their jobs. And in that process, part of the strange part and the dynamic that's weird to me is that the same people who are bringing the AI into the world are neglecting the fact that if a lot of people lose their job because of the AI taking those positions, then how are people going to afford the AI that is being brought into it? And so it becomes kind of like an even greater divide between there's not going to be a middle class anymore. You're either going to have money and haven't gone into it with a lot of savings, or you're going to be broke. And so it kind of becomes a really bad situation. But in that dynamic, what we can do as peer groups is to better understand where we're heading and just say to each other, I got your back. Find people who have your back. Find people who are different from you. And ensure that you are engaged with the community around you, because they're going to keep an eye on you and they're going to help you. But without any of those things, this is going to be a very bad situation. It doesn't have to be. It just needs us to be leaders and to talk about it. So if you are one of the jobs that may be in jeopardy, then I would suggest that you start looking for other avenues of income that are based more in the creative areas or that are not affected directly by AI as of yet, and better align yourself in those positions if at all possible. And then for the rest of us, be ready for readjustments and realignments, and for having to do the hard work of trying to find ourselves in a new world that is coming in whether we want to or not. It's already here. In fact, all I hear lately is all about AI, about this and that, and how wonderful it is, but no one's talking about the problems that come with it. But we are, and that's one of the great benefits to having a blog or to speak so candidly to you all, and the fact that you're actually listening and at least reading it, is that we're at least conscious of the changes that are coming, and a lot of us are going to fare a lot better through these changes and transitions than all the people who aren't reading or seeing this, because they're going to be blindsided, but you're not. What is it you love to do? What is your passion project? I love to write. But the thing that happens with writing, for example, is that you don't want to just use one outlet, because I remember reading specifically about Leonardo da Vinci. The amazing painter that he was became a curse to him by the end of his life. He hated doing it because that's all he did to make money. And so instead of being a passion project, it became just something he had to do. So the caution I'm giving you is don't just have it be a single source of output. Find other things. For example, I'm thinking about doing acting classes, and I'm thinking about, because I'm going to go for whatever's creative and really, really out there, because I really know that, nothing's guaranteed anymore. And I'm so grateful for everything that, like you guys, I'm starting to find other avenues to express myself, because I can guarantee that how I'm living my life now will not be the same way that 2 years from now it's going to be possible. So I have to slow my life down, and many of you are going to have to slow your life down and really go through the list of what you absolutely need to survive and what you can let go of in order to accommodate the turmoil that comes with transition. And the more armed you are, the better we as a species do. And the better we as a species do, the less threatening we are to AI, and the less redundant we seem to AI. So just look at it from a higher perspective, looking down upon all of it. And don't fall into the willful ignorant category. And willful ignorant people are running around thinking that it's the best thing, but they're not getting ready for any of the turmoil that comes with it. So, but you're not gonna be them. You are aware, and your awareness lets you be better prepared. Find your communities, find your passion projects, learn to slow it down, and if heaven forbid you lose your job, then find something to do with your day-to-day that brings you some sort of upliftment, whether it's singing, reading, writing, acting, whatever it is. Find your sense of community and where you feel like you belong, and then go for each other. If you're interested in someone romantically, I'm telling you right now, you better ask them out, because we're running out of time, right? You don't want to necessarily meet somebody at their worst. You tend to want to meet people when they're doing well, and then that way you can kind of go through any stages that come your way, but you don't ever want to meet necessarily people at the worst, because then you can't take responsibility for how they rise above it. But people who are already at a place where they're standing on their own 2 feet, this is the place that you want to look at them. You want to see them for who they are, you want to be as open with each other as you can be, and you want to be ready and prepared and talk about this stuff. Like, well, what do we do if this happens? What do we do if that happens? And if you're just getting to know anybody, don't be afraid to attract opposites of you. Because I'm telling you right now, where we're going, the opposite nature to the dynamic is going to be really beneficial for most of you, right? Like, again, think about it. An introvert who is then left in a place where they're going through an existential crisis really could do with someone who is an extrovert who either has made it through an existential crisis or at least can pull them up, right? And back and forth. And then someone who's a little bit of a Debbie Downer might be really good for someone who's a Pollyanna, because there's nothing more annoying than someone who's completely disconnected from life and just sits there and focuses on nothing but the good, but doesn't ground any of the energy. But in the end, I'm going to tell you right now, if you are a Pollyanna, you're going to do a lot better with this transition than most people, because you're going to have to be grateful for the smallest things. And that's something new for us. We're so used to wanting more, that now the reality is we're going to have to deal with a lot less. And that's a really strange dynamic for especially first world countries who have worked so hard to gain power and to make their life more comfortable. Well, that's great. But what happens when all of that becomes redundant, right? I mean, AI is going to do tremendous things to help everything. I mean, the way that it's being sold to us is that it's going to bring a lot of affordability. But to whom? If the people that used to have those jobs can't afford the services you're now bringing into the world. Talk about the haves and the don'ts. And so for the majority of the population, we fall under the don'ts. So how do we better prepare our mental psyche for the sudden changes and shifts to our economic situation and to the possibility of job reduction and what are the skills? I mean, like, it's a Pandora's box ahead of us. But if you find a way to stay centered and you find a passion project and you want to work with people, then now's the time to go for it. If you want to date somebody that you find really interesting, whatever the block is, blow right through it, be fearless, because we're running out of time. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it just takes a lot of mental readjustment. And a lot of you seem to be aware of that. So don't be afraid. Instead, embrace the change and do your best to align with people who are also going to evolve at the same rate you are. Don't trap yourself in settled relationships where you're just settling to have someone so that you don't go through it alone. That's something that's going to happen to a lot of people because they were asleep and they weren't aware of what was their transition was that was heading their way. And so at the last minute, they're just going to pick whoever's available. That's not going to be us. That is not going to be us. We're going to start looking at people now. And because I think a lot of us already know these people, they're somehow in our consciousness. And so now it's just going to be whoever the more masculine of the two will have to address. And even if you're a lesbian couple, there's always a masculine and feminine in the dynamic. In a gay couple, you know, sometimes I'm more the feminine than the masculine, but that's because I'm more of an introvert. So whether you're the aggressor or the passive, it has less to do with your gender and has more to do with your personality. So be advised that you probably are already aware of each other. So just have the balls right now to kind of step out of your comfort zone, because the comfort zone for everybody is about to be like just demolished. You know what I mean? Like, there's just so much transition and change heading our way that there's just no way to go through it without being honest. And the honesty that I'm going to give you guys the most is that it's pretty traumatic. When you identify yourself with a job that suddenly becomes redundant, then imagine what that does to your soul, right? Not even to your soul, to your ego, because your soul is good to go. But a lot of us identify ourselves with labels and ego. So when that's stripped away, who are you? And that's shocking. And then how does that reflect on your family? And what do they see of you now? Because your entire life you've been identified as your ego. But now they're going to have to deal with your id and try to see how you're going to handle the stresses and strains that come with this transition. And then if you're a housewife, some of you may have to go back to work through the transition if your husband loses. I mean, there's like all these ramifications. And you guys are going to have be on the same page at the same level and trying to evolve at a similar pace in order to make this transition work, right? Because you don't want to bring your problems to your children. And for a lot of us, we've learned that we don't manifest our struggles before them, because then they learn that behavior and then they make it part of their personality. And so you're going to have to walk this line in a way where you're honest with your partner, but also protective of your children in order to help them have hope and a lot of zest for life, even if we're struggling. So all of this is playing out right now. It's not a long-term thing. So again, pick partnerships in business and whatever that bring passion and identify and remove identification of your ego into the scenario. A lot of you might want to start working with charities. A lot of you might want to start doing things that give back. Maybe you have a really brilliant idea that can revolutionize the way we listen to music or do whatever. But you're never going to find that if you're stuck in a box where you're basically waiting to be removed from your position. Instead, be proactive. Like, do what I'm doing, which is Keep your little antenna up for opportunity, and then look for partnerships and friendships and relationships that really bring the best out of you, because you're going to need it for this transition. There's nothing worse than going through a desert with a camel that is dead. You want a camel that can walk. And though you're not going to be riding each other, the point is simple. You're going to need to be able to make the transition safely, which is the point, right? And you want to make sure that your family and your friends and whoever you feel is sacred to you, that they also are safe and that they make it through there. And that's going to take a lot of communication, a lot of leadership, and a lot of centered behavior, grounding your energy into the world and finding out what it is that's free in the universe that brings you joy. Do you love sunsets? That's really romantic between two people. Now you're going to have time to go and sit and watch the sunsets. Or if your kids, aren't used to going out to play, this is a great motivation to take them to parks and to go camping and to do stuff like that, because you're going to need to fill your time with something. The era of abundance is a great golden age. It's wonderful in theory. But the transition to get to where we really value and are grateful for all the changes coming require a preemptive strike, which is just really align yourself with what it is that interests you and brings you a lot of joy, and make that part of your day-to-day routine, because you're going to have to slow it down. Everyone's going to have to slow down. Economic transitions like this are pretty severe, and one of the things that keep people alive is their family and their dynamic of finding something that gives them purpose. And so instead of being reactionary and waiting for the shoe to drop, why don't you just do what I'm doing, which is really start doing a lot of fun stuff and never taking it for granted, and understanding that whatever comes your way, hopefully you're going to have a partner in business or in love or in life or friendships that can make the transition with you. But you're going to have to look at things differently in order to ground that wonderful energy, because this change is rough. It's just rough. And no matter how good it turns out in the end, humans do not like change. And so how do we help each other get through it without hurting each other and without weaponizing it and without turning people against each other? I mean, part of the plan here is to break us down so that we're divided. A house divided shall fall. And that is purposeful. But if we can remember going into this that we're going to need each other to be strong and to stand arm in arm, hand in hand, shoulder to shoulder, whatever you want to say, then that makes you invincible. And that's where we need to put our headspace. So just for now, look at what makes you happy. I spent the 4 days basically cleaning my house, and it wasn't until recently that I even bothered to look down to see what was happening with the post. But it was nice to see that reaction, so it means that you guys are reading and listening. The point is, let's just now move forward in a positive way that helps us all lift and uplift each other and be there compassionately and empathetically for each other. Because the divine is within all of us, and it's manifesting differently in each storyline. But at the end of the day, we are still its dream, and it's wanting us to be happy, safe, healthy, and above all, it wants us to be able to make it through this transition in a way that brings us to whatever our home is. And if it all ends because of all of the other stuff that might happen, then don't you want to be surrounded by people you love and that you have the best relationships with? Whatever your home is in your head, double down on that. Strip it bare to just the people that are essential in your life, and understand that there's going to be some rough patches through this transition. But the more prepared we are and the more honest we are with what we see coming, for those of you who are going to go through the recession or going to go through the job loss and all of the stuff that might happen, the more prepared you are and the better we all are. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there. But the moral story is, I just want us to look at it from a compassionate, loving place, because it will be in love where we all thrive. Without it, this is going to be a miserable situation. But if you have love for each other and you have love for yourself, and you're going to take my advice that I'm giving you right now, take it seriously, sit yourself and your family down and say, okay, things are about to majorly change, and I don't know how, but I know that it's going to be very abrupt, and I know that we're going to have to find better ways to deal with life. So what is it that everybody wants to do? What brings you your passion? And start making sure that you put money away in order to have that consistently through whatever ups and downs come our way. And that's where I want to leave you guys for the day. Hopefully this is something that is of service to you. But I also want to end by saying thank you to all of the people who've read and looked at the past video, because that was very surprising. But I am grateful. But at the end of the day, I just want you guys to understand that we can do this, and it's going to be fine. For a lot of us, it's going to be a great transition. But it's because we listen to each other, and because we better understand how to simplify our life and to humble it in order to be able to walk right on through this desert. All right, guys, have a good day.